after you have an abusive one. I'm sorry, I'm just having a little trouble with my screen right here. There we go. Okay, so lots of people have a hard time finding a healthy relationship after an abusive one. So we're going to talk about that today and, figure out how we can get to the point we all want to be at. Our first guest will be Tiffany Denny, Certified Life and Health Coach, CMP, who will tell us about what she went through mentally and emotionally when she left an abusive relationship and how she got to the healthy point she's at today. Then we'll bring on therapist Jenna Schaefer, MS-LPC-IT, to talk about, how to make your current relationship healthier and, what to look for and what to strive for. So first, Tiffany Denny, she's the co-founder of the Relationship Recovery and is a survivor of domestic violence and infidelity. And she believes that all women should be in a safe and loving relationship. I will bring her. Hi, Tiffany. Thank you for coming on today. I appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, unfortunately, you were in an abusive relationship. Can you tell me a little bit about that, how long it lasted, and how long ago it was that you left?
Sure. So I was married for just about 21 years. And in that marriage, we have 5 children together. It was, I had met my ex-husband at a very young age, at the age of 12. And he was just kind of working for my father and just kind of part of our family. And we didn't really realize what was happening, but the grooming was happening. And anyways, so, it was a very long marriage, and it was a lot of ups and downs, mostly. There was all sorts of abuse in that marriage, physical. The psychological was definitely the worst. For me, I suffered tremendously in a trauma bond that was really extremely hard to break. When I tell my story now, I don't like to give a lot of time to the abuser, because I feel like it's actually giving my power away. What I really like to focus on is more in the aspect of how I got out and what I did to get healthy again.
Okay, so that's exactly what we want to talk to you about too. And when a person comes out of an abusive relationship, for me at least, I was kind of floundering, and I had to feel, I had to acknowledge that I had been a victim, and that led to some, victim mentality for a while. Did you experience that?
Absolutely. I remember just telling anybody and everybody my story that would listen, for a couple of reasons. One was that I was very careful in my marriage to not let the outside world know what was happening on the inside. I was embarrassed. I was, trying to keep it all together. I wanted that family that I had, come into this, thinking that I was going to get, this marriage that I was going to get, that wasn't what was happening. So for that reason, and then for also the reason of, I wanted people to believe me, because, on the outside, because I'd done such a great job at making things look like they were fine. And then all of a sudden one day it all blows up and we're, getting divorced. I just felt like I had to tell people my story. And the more I would do that, the longer it kept me in victim mode.
That makes sense. Sometimes people have said with the victim mentality that they feel like somebody is always going to be bringing them down, and maybe will fall into relationships that fit that pattern. And what are your ideas on why we repeat a bad relationship like that?
I feel like we repeat when we don't heal, when we don't get to what it was that we contributed to that relationship. Because although there's no excuse for abuse whatsoever, we still play a part in that relationship. And until we are able to acknowledge that and own that, we kind of stay trapped. We stay in this victim mentality because of a couple of things. For me, it made me feel validated. So if I could tell my story to somebody and they could feel bad for me, then I felt validated. It also, when I would stay in that victim mode, it would keep me safe. It would keep me so that I wouldn't have to go out and do the work, because it's hard to heal. It's hard to do that work. It's worth every bit of it, 100%. But it's not a very comfortable place to be. And, the other thing I did a lot of was I would just numb myself through, I did it through work. I would just work day and night so that I didn't have to do that work on myself to be able to move forward. But if we don't do that, then our chances of repeating that toxic relationship are really great. So we have to buckle down and do that work.
What was it that made you realize that you needed to work on yourself? Was there one certain thing or, circumstances that caused you to kind of go, all right, let's shake it up. I got to work on me.
Yeah. I had a good friend that basically was super honest with me. And she sat me down one day and she said, "Do you really want to live like this forever?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" And she said, "You are never going to grow until you're willing to reach out and get some help." And at that point, I was able to find a therapist, which she was wonderful for me. And I feel very blessed that I am fortunate that I was able to find her. And once I started to do that and I started to understand really what it was that I'd been through, I didn't know what a trauma bond was. I didn't know what gaslighting was. I didn't know all of these tactics that had been used on me. Once I started to educate myself and really get an idea of, okay, this was a big deal. So now I've got to take all these things and these false beliefs that I have about myself, and I've got to flip the script and I've got to start like doing some work to believe differently about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really her that kind of, made me open my eyes to, I either was going to just stay and kind of be miserable and potentially just repeat the same relationship, or I had an opportunity to grow.
Do you think, I kind of remember shifting from my partner's abuse to self-abuse, and I repeated a lot of the things that I had heard to myself. And once I realized it was his voice in my head, that's when I kind of realized what was going on. And I had a point to that. It wasn't about me, but now I can't remember. I'm sorry.
No, you're totally fine. One more thing I would just add to that is something that we teach a lot at the relationship recovery is, if we have one of the beliefs I had in my head was that I'm broken. I just would tell myself over and over again. And so the way I would change that is I would say something to myself like, you've been through some really hard stuff and you now have the opportunity to heal and get to a different place. And I would write I'd write the false belief down, and then I would flip the script and change that story. And then I would read it multiple times till I could get myself to really grasp onto it and believe that I wasn't broken. I was just had been through an experience and I now had an opportunity to become whole again.
Mm-hmm. And I want to ask everybody to leave your comments and your opinions and your experiences in the chat box, and we will talk about them as we go along. And thank you for coming today. I see you here, so thank you for being here. Okay, so Tiffany, let's skip ahead.
Okay.
All right. You currently coach other women to find safe and loving relationships. But the journey you went on to get from where you were to here, that's it takes a lot of work, and it's really amazing, to be able to stick with that, because it's, layer upon layer kind of.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you finally get to a healthy relationship? How did you know you were going to have one?
So I had been in therapy for a while, for about 3 years, and I was diligent, and I really worked hard with what my therapist had, given me to do, to work on action steps, whatever it was. I thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to really dig in and do this. I'm going to go, 100% in, because I don't want to repeat this again. And I ended up meeting my current husband about, let's see, we've been married about almost 8 years. And I do, the funny thing is I was so used to chaos. I was just so used to a chaotic relationship. So when I met my husband, I felt like I had to test every little bit about him, because he was way too nice. And I thought the shoe was gonna, the shoe was gonna drop. I know it will. So I would find myself like poking the tiger a little bit and trying to cause arguments. And one day I kind of recognized what I was doing, and I stepped back and I thought, you know what? Now would be a really good time for me to dig in and do some additional work, because obviously he's, stayed the same way he was when he met me. He's never changed, and I've been pushing, to see this dark side of him. And I had to really start to change my beliefs around what a healthy relationship looks like, because it was so foreign to me. And I'm so grateful that I did, because he's wonderful. And he's been patient with me, and he's taught me a lot of things about what healthy relationships should look like and are.
So what is it that you do differently now in this relationship versus, before in the abusive one? How do you view your role?
So I had to work a lot on codependency. It was a problem for me. And coming into this relationship, it was also a problem for me, because I was afraid to ask for what I needed. I was such a people pleaser. And I just didn't know what his reaction would be back to me. And so, codependency was something that I worked on a lot. We have good communication. I still, I'll go out to dinner with some friends, and it's interesting. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score that we, suggest to a lot of our clients. And it's interesting, though. I'll be out and I'll kind of get this feeling of panic almost, because I couldn't go out with friends. If I did, it was a problem, right? And so just learning to trust myself and trust, I called him one day when we were very first married, and I was in a panic because I was late getting home, because that was another issue. And, he just said, I love that you're calling to tell me that you're going to be late. So I know you're okay, but if you're calling me because you think I'm going to be angry with you, you can't call me. And so it was those little things and those little cues that I would listen to really closely to know that I was safe. And I think that that is the word I would describe my relationship as: safe.
Well, as a coach, what is one of the main problems that your clients come to you with, and how do you kind of coach them through that issue?
Okay. Yeah. So most of our clients come to us that are either in a toxic relationship or have left one, and they just are struggling to navigate this new life and figure out their identity, and figure out why they have this strong desire to go back, and all these things that come with leaving a toxic relationship. So whatever it is that we're teaching, we always teach the same way. So we really believe that we have to build on the foundations of healing. So we teach things like, how to trust your intuition. We teach how to keep your energy up. We teach how to not self-sabotage, those kind of things. We really believe that people need a core system of things to rely on, so that when they start to do the work and, essentially put those work boots on, and they feel like it's just too hard and they want to quit, they have some tools and some resources to grab back to. And then we kind of the middle of what we teach how to kind of process that trauma differently than what we're used to processing it. And, in that section, we we deal with a lot of the hard stuff with the codependency and boundaries and all those kind of things. And then we, in our third tier of teaching, we talk about moving forward and changing those narratives of our story and our belief systems. And we really work hard in that area so that they can walk away when they're ready to be done with coaching, feeling like they know themselves again and that they can go out into the world with some confidence. And I think the thing that we hear from our clients most when they've been through our programs is that they just finally have peace.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that is perfect. And that was amazing when I first felt that. I couldn't believe it. It was beautiful.
Yes.
But is there anything else that you'd like to add today?
No, just thank you for being here. And I guess just if you are in this situation or have been in this situation, just know that there's so many people that have walked this pathway. I mean, we always tell people we're not that special. We're just a little further ahead of people, and we're able to reach back and pull people up with us. And that's the beauty. And one day you'll be able to do the same to some, for somebody else. And so, unfortunately we've had to deal with the abuse, but the beautiful thing is we now have the choice to take it and turn it into something that can be super helpful to ourselves and to others.
That's wonderful. And I appreciate you being on today, Tiffany. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Let's see. Okay. Our next guest is therapist Jenna Schaefer, and one of her specialties happens to be narcissistic abuse recovery and codependent relationships. So let me bring Jenna up. Hi, Jenna. How are you today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. This has been interesting to me. I never lose interest in this topic because so many people go through it. You can't say enough about it. So I asked Tiffany this question, but I kind of want to get your take on it too. After you leave an abusive relationship, what can you do to not fall back into another one?
I think the key here, well, it's a couple different things. For one, and I really like what she said about getting therapy and working on the codependency. That is definitely a journey and definitely something that I think needs to happen that can be really helpful in preventing falling back into abusive relationships. And the second thing is having a good support system. Having people in your life that you trust, friends, family members that you trust to be there for you, I think is really helpful to not fall back into that, because a lot of the times when people leave abusive relationships, on top of having to sort through all of the abuse and the confusion, a lot of people struggle with loneliness. And having people there that are supportive for you can be really helpful to prevent yourself from going back, and also just for abuse recovery in general.
Where would you start? Let's say that during your relationship, you did such a good job of pushing everybody away, that now you just really don't have anybody. Is there, what do you do when that happens?
Yeah, that can happen because a lot of times in abusive relationships, you aren't allowed to have a support system. You're very, very isolated. So it can take time to develop a good one. One thing I would suggest that can be really, really helpful is to go to support groups. If there is a domestic violence center or a women's center in your area, or even trying to find one online. I know that there's even Facebook groups for survivors, is to find people that can be supportive, and a community of people that do understand what you're going through can be really, really helpful. That would be something I would suggest if you don't have those immediate people in your life at the moment.
I think that's a really good point there. And okay, so when you get into the new relationship, like Tiffany said, she tried to poke the tiger. She was trying to create the chaos because she wanted to see the evil side, before it was, it had to be there. But, there are other things that people might do. Speaking for myself, I kind of did that same thing, but I jumped it all the way ahead to where he had already reacted and I was despondent and crying in the corner over something that this one had never really done. It was really confusing for him and really confusing for me. So, when you find yourself doing things that just aren't going to work with this healthy person that you're now with, what do you do for yourself to make that better?
When you're with the person and you're having issues with that relationship,
well, you're kind of making issues with that relationship.
Making issues, so kind of a self-sabotage.
Yeah. Good. Yeah.
I think that's really common. Being a survivor myself, and I am one as well, I can definitely relate to that because I definitely sabotaged relationships too, coming out of it. I think one thing is to continue to heal. I think sometimes, especially when you've been in an abusive relationship, it can be easy to, you have that loneliness, you have, the trauma bond. It's easy to jump into something too quickly. And I think that making sure that you are taking that time to heal and really work on yourself and taking that time to reflect can help with some of that self-sabotaging behaviors. And, going to therapy, continuing to work on it through your therapist or with your therapist, I think is so important for that too, because that does happen a lot. Something I can definitely relate to.
Barbara Week says, very enlightening. So thank you, Barbara, for leaving a comment for us here. And Tiffany talked about trauma bond, and so are you. So can you explain a trauma bond to us?
Yeah, so a trauma bond is a bond that a victim, I really hate that term, but I will kind of say what the kind of the idea is that a victim or someone that is going through abuse develops with their abuser. So it kind of becomes like this, because the thing about abusive relationships is they're not always abusive. If we were in a relationship 24/7 that was abusive, it probably would be a lot easier to leave. The thing that keeps people trapped in these relationships are those good moments that are not abusive. And so it really is reinforced through those times that the abuse is not occurring. A lot of times people describe, sometimes they're so amazing. It's kind of that Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde idea. Sometimes they're so great and they buy me gifts and they say nice things to me. And so our brains crave that. They do, because that part feels good. And what happens is something that we call intermittent reinforcement, which is a big term. The idea behind intermittent reinforcement, the best way that I can give a metaphor or an idea for that is kind of how gambling addictions develop. So when you go to the casino, you don't always win every single time that you play a slot machine or a game. But when you do, it feels awesome. It feels really good and you get a rush of endorphins and you want that again. So that reinforcement develops that way. So it's the same thing in abusive relationships where we do tend to crave and fight for things that aren't always guaranteed to us, because when we do get that payoff, it feels that much better. So a lot of the time that's what's happening when we are referring to trauma bond in an abusive relationship.
Okay. That makes more sense to me now. So tell me what a healthy relationship looks like. How do two people relate to each other, in the best way possible?
Safety, for one. Safety is essential. Safety should be present in all relationships, especially with an intimate partner. I think that's the hardest part for abuse victims, to feel safe in the relationships with people. And I think that respect is huge. Someone that knows how to validate how you're feeling is huge. Because in abusive relationships, you are not being validated. A lot of the times you're told that your emotions are irrational or you're being too sensitive or they don't matter. You're made to feel like your feelings don't matter. So having a partner that does validate how you're feeling, even the stuff that doesn't feel good, even when you're not having a good day, is really important.
What does that sound like? Is that like, ooh, I can see you're not feeling well? Or, what are some examples of validating my feelings, our feelings?
So if you come to your partner, let's say, like, for example, like you're upset about something You know, it can be as simple as just being like, I understand, I get why you're upset.
Mhm.
It's just knowing that you have permission to feel certain emotions, even ones that don't feel good. That's
Mhm.
validation.
That makes sense. So you've got safety and emotional validation. Did you have another one in there that I've already forgotten?
Respect.
Respect.
Respect is
Yes,
huge.
respect.
Respect often does not happen in abusive relationships. Um, and that is important. If I had to name probably one of the most important emotional needs that people have, I think respect is right up there at the top next to
Mhm.
love and trust. Respect is huge. It really, really is. I couldn't imagine a healthy relationship without having respect and trust.
Yeah.
So, mhm.
How long does it take to heal from an abusive relationship?
That's a really good question. I actually don't really have an answer that I can really give, like it's going to take this amount of time for you to heal. I don't. And also, healing can look different for everyone too. And so it's really subjective on what that would mean for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I can speak from my own experience about how long it took for me, and I can definitely still say it's still an ongoing thing for me
Mm-hmm.
too. And I think for lots of people, it is. When people leave an abusive relationship, and I believe Tiffany kind of spoke to this too, the voice that you're hearing in your head is not your own. It's the abuser's voice. And
Yeah.
that's what you're left with when you leave. You don't have your own voice anymore in your head. And that is due to all of the manipulation, psychological abuse, and gaslighting. And to undo all of that takes a long time. And I can't ever tell someone it's not going to come back again. We
Right.
might not ever get to that point. There could be times where it will creep up again, or you will feel insecure, or you will feel less worthy on some days.
Mhm.
Um, I know people that have been on an abuse relationship for a decade plus that still have bad days.
Yeah.
So how long it can take to heal, I think it depends on what healing means to you. I
Mm-hmm.
definitely think a few years of
Mm-hmm.
therapy. Tiffany said that she was in therapy for about 3 years. Um, it took me a while in therapy too, a few years, to really start to feel that peace that you guys are
Yeah.
talking about. So it's not an overnight process. It is a journey.
I agree with that. I was married for 17 years, and so I gave myself, you got 6 years to get better, right? I tried to put that, but what I find is I was a lot better after 6 years, right? But
Mm-hmm.
still, sometimes there's some undoing to do, and to get to that place. So I've been out for 11 years, a little under 11 years, and I know I'm still healing. So I just say that because I don't blame myself for taking too long, and I don't think anybody else should hold themselves accountable to that arbitrary number that I set up for myself. So do you have any other thoughts you might want to share with our audience today?
Yeah, one thing I would just add to the healing thing too is I think a lot of times when we are trying to healing, and this can really be from anything, definitely from situations like this, is that we have the expectation that it's always going to look like this, like the next day is always going to be better than the last day. And one thing I remember feeling so frustrated with when I was going through my process is I would have a lot of good days and then just have a terrible day. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh my goodness, like I have not moved at all and I still feel just horrible and I'd be crying in my shower. That was my favorite place
Oh.
to cry for years. Um, so, and healing really does look like this. It's not a linear process. Is that there are going to be good days and there are going to be bad days. And one thing I did notice is that my stretches of good days would continue to get longer. So that's kind of how I evaluated my healing process, was how many good days I had, but I still allow myself to have the bad days too.
That's a good idea. I like that. And I really appreciate you being here again, Jenna. I love what you tell us, and I can't wait to see you again. So thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Tiffany, for sharing your story. That is brave and awesome. So thank you so much for having me.
Bye. Okay, so that's going to wrap it up for today. But I want to remind you that you can go to healthyplace.com and you can find information on abusive relationships, all kinds of the different forms of abuse. And you can also find information on healthy relationships. So you can kind of get an idea of what to shoot for. And I want to thank you all for being here. And I will see you again in 2 weeks on our next Facebook Live.